So it is a happy accident that I'm here in Florence, because it was not my intention to do any of this work in cultural heritage. My plan was to be a lawyer and be a corporate lawyer. And instead, I'm here with you all. And so I thank you very much for our wonderful hosts in the city, for NYU and everyone else who put this together. When I finished university and finished law school, I actually came here to Europe and studied at Leiden University in the Netherlands. So thank you for the Dutch here in the audience. And this completely changed my life, because I learned more about cultural history and more about international law. After studying at Leiden, I studied it at the Hague Academy of International Law, where I learned more about the international tribunals. And here I will warn you that my pictures get a little more violent, because my work in international law and war crimes focused on the prosecution of people who committed terrible atrocities. And I learned first about many of these things. One is here in Holland, about the various international tribunals. And I was very lucky when the opening of the ICC came, and we heard from one of our colleagues from the ICC, to get a job here at the Yugoslav War Crimes Tribunal, where I was the youngest, most baby junior prosecutor there. That's me in my youth. And while at the tribunal for Yugoslavia, we focused a lot on war crimes in Bosnia, whether it be destruction of property, destruction of human beings from prison camps, murder, mass crime, and indeed genocide. What the tribunal also focused on was cultural heritage crime. And here I think is something important. In a war, like the war in Bosnia, with limited munitions, because there was an embargo on, military forces decided to use limited munitions, which were expensive, to destroy cultural heritage sites. They wanted people to disappear, not just disappear in person, but for their culture to disappear, like they were never there before. And this struck me as someone who loved history and spent time traveling around the world between university and law school. The fact that people would spend resources, military resources, to destroy culture was itself a statement of the importance of culture, because military commanders don't waste munitions on things that they don't feel is important. Now, I focus my time really on the Srebrenica genocide, and this is one of our NDTs that was brought in, arrested by the US Special Forces, and then brought in by the Dutch Special Police to the prison in The Hague. This is one of the generals that we helped prosecute, General Krstić. He was the first general prosecuted for the Srebrenica genocide case. I also worked on this case against Slobodan Milosevic. Milosevic, you guys all are very familiar with, was the ringleader in many of this destruction that happened in the former Yugoslavia. What I did not know too much of, however, was the fact that he did not just help destroy many lives, but he also stole millions, and in fact $1 billion from the people of Yugoslavia. And in fact, people like Milosevic are not unique. They steal millions and billions of dollars all the time. In fact, $20 to $40 billion is stolen every year by political leaders and corrupt leaders around the world. These are some of them that might look familiar to you. All these individuals are known to be not wonderful leaders, but also hugely corrupt. They stole billions of dollars from their own people, from the taxpayers, which means it does not go to actually public work projects, to poor people. And generally speaking, people got away with it, and this was not something discussed at the highest levels of government until this guy came around. This is Bob Zoellick. He's the former president of the World Bank. And he set up a thing called the Stolen Asset Recovery Initiative, which he very generously invited me to help join and set up, which focused on helping recover stolen assets from around the world, from various grand corruption cases. We worked on a number of different matters. This is one of them. Sani Abacha from Nigeria, also Babirach Devalier from Haiti. These people stole millions of dollars from their people. And what's fascinating about this world of grand corruption is the fact that in an age of impunity where people generally get away with these terrible crimes, the fact that there's now increased attention to the fact that these crimes should not happen. The Wall Street Journal, the leading, I would suggest to you, business newspaper in the world, puts out an article with comic strips demonstrating political leaders trying to go to an ATM machine to withdraw the money they stole from and they put in Swiss banks, and the fact that governments are stopping this. When the fall of Gaddafi was coming through, I was contacted by some friends that were working with the Transitional Council, basically the Libyan rebels, where these people were focused on, if Gaddafi falls, what can we do to help recover the money that was stolen by his government? At the same time, you have the government of Ben Ali falling, and the fact that international groups like STAR, like the French and other governments, were going after his assets, whether it be jets, houses, what have you. And more recently, you have governments going after the assets of leaders from Africa who have stolen tremendous amounts of money from their countries to buy cars like this in Paris, and this house in Malibu, California. But I would suggest to you that there's two different worlds operating at the same time. One is the world of human rights, mass crimes, prosecutions, and the other is the world of anti-corruption, who rarely interact. Until this report came out, this was actually launched at the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and it was a way of looking at old crimes to see if we can learn from them and try to focus on prosecutions of unique crimes. This was on corporate war crimes, on plunder. And I would suggest to you that one world that brings all these things together is learning from our history. For many folks, particularly in the United States, and perhaps even here in Europe, we were not familiar with the Allied effort to recover looted antiquities from the Second World War. And it's because of very attractive men, like these guys, that we now are more familiar with the fact that this happened in the Second World War. And I think this creates a larger awareness of the broader public and the importance of cultural heritage crime and how to tackle it. And in fact, my involvement in this was by luck. I wound up being asked to help support the government of Cambodia to get back some antiquities, like this one, that were stolen during the Khmer Rouge time, stolen in conflict, and brought to New York City. Some were at the Met, a beautiful museum. Another piece was at Sotheby's auction house, where they were going to sell it between $2 and $5 million. And there was a legal case to try to recover this piece. This piece had been stolen from Cambodia. You can see this is where it was once. It was cut off at the ankles and brought to New York City. And the idea was trying to reunite this. So we worked on this matter, and this was personally touching to me. Why? Because I spent time between university and law school backpacking around the world to see these beautiful antiquities. And one of the places I went to was Petra, which I know the government of Italy has a tremendous relationship with. And it moved me because of the greater sense of humanity in these locations, as the many speakers have talked to us about already today. And I think it's tremendous that there's international groups like the Italian Camerieri and others who are so passionate about recovering this cultural heritage. And at the same time I was working on this Cambodia case, on my legal side of things, because I'm a lawyer, I was working in Libya. This is one of the wonderful places in Libya that is now endangered by warring parties. And so, as many of our colleagues spoke to us today, there's now a huge effort on trying to learn more what ISIS and other people are doing in the Middle East. Because of conflict, people take advantage of conflict, and they steal things. It's not rocket science. This is an archaeological rich site in the Middle East before the conflict and after the conflict. You can see the amount of digging, of excavations going on to try to people trying to steal this cultural heritage. And then, before the conflict, after the conflict. And so what I suggest to you is the fact that warring parties like Daesh or ISIS are doing two things. They're blowing up things for propaganda value, because it shows how important they are in their minds. But they're also looting things that they can sell in the marketplace, because these are thoughtful business, transnational business crime syndicates. They're making money from this. They're making money because of marketplaces we all live in. And for me, this is, again, what hit me personally, because when they attacked places in Iraq, this is a place I used to work. I used to work for our Minister of Defense, doing foreign policy work. And so a place like the Ziggurat of this place here, in Iraq, was a place that I visited with the Secretary of Defense, with Robert Gates. And it puts yourself in a unique place to understand the small little blip of human history that we reside in. We are here for a moment in time, and the fact that places like this still exist remind us where we are in the cycle of human continuum. And while there's international efforts led by various world leaders to highlight the concern of looted antiquities, like the Red List, like Irina Bokova, who's been working obviously tirelessly at UNESCO on this, again in conjunction with the ICC and the case we heard about earlier today. There's also been an effort by countries to recover their antiquities. This was the award ceremony where knighthoods were bestowed on the American prosecutors to help recover these antiquities. And it was during this meeting that I had a great discussion with the Deputy Prime Minister of Cambodia, where I said, why don't we take some of the positive energy from this return to change the marketplace? How can we better engage with people at all different backgrounds, with the various communities who engage with antiquities to change the marketplace? And my suggestion is perhaps we can take this conversation to what I would suggest is the leading business forum in the World Economic Forum in Davos. How do we bring together various stakeholders who don't usually talk to each other? Basically, source countries where these antiquities come from, patron states, countries that want to help, like Italy, family offices, royals, leaders in the industry. How do we work with them together to try to change the marketplace, to make it more responsive? How can we learn from other examples? I'll give the example of blood diamonds. This was a case where so much conflict was being the result of diamonds that were looted from conflict zones that went into the conflict and helped kill more people. And a thoughtful international architecture decided to come up with the Kimberley process, which is not perfect, but is a start. It is a unique way of looking at a challenge and trying to find a solution. And I suggest to you that there are other things we could look at. Fair trade coffee would be one. How do we better respond to the challenges in the coffee trade? A good housekeeping seal of approval. What are ways we could work with the antiquities industry to demonstrate that if you're buying an antiquity, they could certify in some way or demonstrate through the chain of the history, the provenance of these pieces, that they're not funding conflict. And of course, as we've learned today, this is an active issue, whether it be in Palmyra or other places, where things are being destroyed and looted, and indeed, people are giving their lives to save these heritage items, like this archaeologist from Syria. We now have a new construct, the global goals, the SDGs. We have a global opinion, a consensus, that collectively we have to work together for the next stage of development. And so how do we now look at this in another perspective? So whereas I've been working at the stratospheric level in Davos, trying to get this issue highlighted, I'm now working actually in Hollywood, ironically, where I'm from, trying to look at social impact television. Because for the political leaders here, you know that you are leaders in your own cities, in your own countries. But there's a balance of power to be shared between you and your people. You have to work together. So how do we engage a larger public, a larger audience that this is important? So I'm now working on a TV show, a drama, a fiction. So think Indiana Jones meets James Bond meets CSI. It's going to be an action-adventure type show. Well, every show will focus on a particular city or a place in the world that has rich cultural heritage to demonstrate that there is a richness that we all share, a common humanity. But when something gets stolen, it's not just stolen from that community, it's stolen from all of us. And so the hero will be someone who helps recover these antiquities and brings them back to where they come from. And my invitation to all the mayors here is, to the extent you would like your city to be a focus of this, the rich cultural heritage, let me know. If it works out, we have 22 episodes this season we have to work on, and I'd be delighted to chat with all of you. And the hope is by doing this, there will be less items like this that are stolen, and less time-consuming processes involving all these government agencies to recover these pieces. This is a piece that was recovered by the US government that was stolen from Iraq and found in the United States. This, of course, is the piece that started my kind of passion in this, that was returned to Cambodia. And the hope is collectively, by working at the highest levels of government and engaging the public, to demonstrate how important this is, we can have more returns and in fact have less things stolen, because there'll be less of a marketplace for all this to be sold. I recognize that this will not change the world of looted antiquities massively, but we can understand that these pieces should not be sold at the high streets of London, but rather the back alleys. This is a criminal behavior and something we have to treat like crime and not honor as we had in the past. Thank you so much.